There we go. We're starting recording. So the way I wanted to start this space, and I'm starting right now, is that I wanted just to go back quickly to the question from the last space where a user asked, can you go in some greater depth on what justice means here? And they're referring to the page prior to the one you see in the nest. So again, fragment 8, but the second page. It's in the 5th episode of this series. But the line he's referring to, I believe, is, if we find it, here we go. Oh wait, that's what's first? Here we go. So, nor will the strength of trust ever allow anything to come to be from what is besides it. Therefore, neither its coming to be nor its perishing has justice allowed, relaxing her shackles, but she holds it fast. The decision about these matters depends on this, is or is not. But it has been decided, as is necessary, to let go the one as unthinkable, unnameable, but to allow the other so that it is and true. So the question is, what is the use of justice here for Parmenides, or what does justice mean in general in this poem? And I think the first time we encountered it and discussed it was actually in the first episode of this series, when we began with the proem. Just to, again, it's sort of off the cuff, but just to indicate where I'm going with this, I'm going to think that justice has a particular relationship to necessity for Parmenides. Obviously, justice is being personified or deified here. It's being interpreted as the goddess Justice. But let's go back to where she first appears. And again, I want to get through this quickly because I do want to get through the fragment section that we're actually going to read. But on the last page of the proem, actually not the last page, no. There we go. On the 1, 2, here we go. On the second page of the proem, and I mentioned the second page because this is a Phoenix Pre-Socratics edition. And also if you go back and look at the screenshots, it's going to be page number 2. But we find justice because, remember, the maidens are taking the youth to go see the goddess. So the youth is on the chariot and he's heading off to see her. And it says, there are the gates of the paths of night and day, and a lintel and a threshold of stone surround them, and the ethereal gates themselves are filled with great doors. And for these, justice, much avenging, holds the keys of retribution. Coaxing her with gentle words, the maidens did cunningly persuade her that she should push back the bolted bar for them swiftly from the gates. And then it goes on, the gates open, the youth goes through, and there he meets the goddess. Now, putting aside interpretations where the goddess is justice, I don't have that interpretation. That's the first place where we meet justice. She's at the gates of night and day, and she's going to let the youth through to this place that I suppose is beyond opposites, or is a place of enlightenment, or, it's through this gate to meet a goddess and to be given this metaphysical account. And back in the first episode of this, the thing that jumped out to me was we see justice at this special metaphysical location in an earlier pre-Socratic. So I pointed out Anaximander, right? So there's a whole bunch of these Anax people. There's like Anaximenes, who's the air guy. There's Anaxagoras, who's much later in Athens. But Anaximander is the one we're looking for. And Anaximander, who, it's hard to say anything with absolute certainty about him because he's very poorly preserved in terms of direct quotation. I think there's only one substantial direct quotation. I think there's one at all. It's arguably two. And he has justice basically playing a role in change, which is interesting, right? Because change is going to be a major part of this work by Parmenides, obviously, a major part of what the goddess is talking about. And for Anaximander, justice is also, Anaximander being an earlier author than Parmenides, justice is in his system as well. And she's right there between the part of a primordial soup or an unlimited sort of primordial realm or substance, which gives birth to, or burps forth, the world that we know of, particular things and elements and whatnot. And the role of justice is, she is, to the best that I can tell from these very limited fragments and without having it in front of me right now, she's essentially at this point between the primordial world of unlimited infiniteness where things come forth and return to, and the world that they're going out into, which is of elements and particulars and you and me. And justice makes sure that everything repays its birth with its death in equal measure, right? So whatever comes forward from the apeiron, from this primordial soup or unlimited world that's beyond this existence, whatever comes forth out of it and forms the elements and then gets combined to form the people and the trees and whatever, it will also then be broken back down and repay its death. I mean, it will repay its birth with its death and return back to the primordial unlimited. Now, I'm not saying it's the only way that Anaximander has ever been interpreted, or that there are a lot of fragments, but it's interesting just right now observing that actually that's change, right? So to be born out of the apeiron, or the primordial, and to come into existence, again, this is an Anaximandrian system, to be born, to form elements and to be constituted into things like trees and houses. This is all about a world of change, right? And then to be broken down and to repay your birth with your death and go back to the apeiron is also about change or degeneration. So it's like a generation into this complex world of things and a degeneration back into the primordial apeiron. And so I think that's also a very interesting comparison. But here we have justice. I think what we're going to see justice's role as being is necessity in Fragment 8. So in Fragment 1, where we first met her, she's there at this threshold of opposites where it all comes together. Or where the youth is going to step away from the mortal realm and go to meet the goddess. So justice is there at a very crucial location where we're going to go from the particular world of mortals and change into this, not the primordial apeiron, but some other sort of metaphysical observation. So when we first went through the first episode of this series and we read the first fragment, the proem, I did draw that comparison with Anaximander. And I think now that we've reached Fragment 8 on this third page here, we're going to meet justice again. And I think we're going to find that it's very interesting because she's going to represent, she's been positioned at the same place as we kind of find her in Anaximander. And in Parmenides, she's going to represent necessity, I think. If I had to just take a stab at it right now, I would say the meaning of justice here is necessity. And it's specifically necessity in terms of its significance for change. Because remember, the reason why things are ungenerated, the reason why they're imperishable, there's no creation or destruction. All is ungenerated and imperishable, whole, single-limbed, etc. This all follows from necessity, because there is only one path that it is. And so everything kind of gets... The views on change are different from the views we see in Anaximander, because I think justice has also got a different character here. It's a character of necessity. And as necessity, everything is held in place. And so in Fragment 8, why would I say that justice is really necessity and what has to be is what will be? Is because, and I hate to skip ahead without reading the whole fragment, but I'm still looking at Fragment 2. Hold on. Fragment 3, here we go. So in the section I'm about to read from start to finish, but I did want to just address this person's question about justice. We're going to see justice again. From last week, actually. Good. We saw justice again on the last episode in Fragment 8 because it said he ruled out coming to be from what is, and he rules out perishing, saying that justice does not allow this. She doesn't relax her shackles. She holds it fast, right? And the decision about these matters depends on this, is or is not. But it has been decided as is necessary. So we have justice being the one who does not allow change to occur. And why does generation and perishing not occur? Well, she's holding it fast. She doesn't relax the shackles. But what is she? She is necessity. And why is it necessary that this talk of generation and perishing is wrong or cannot be? Because the question is or is not. But it's been decided there only is. And of course, we go back to the start of Fragment 8, the very beginning, and I'll end it here. A single story of a root still is left, that it is. On this root there are signs, many, very numerous, that what is ungenerated, imperishable, whole, single-limbed, steadfast, and complete. So, there you have it. Justice will not allow generation and perishing. She won't release her shackles, but holds it fast, is a poetic way, in my interpretation, of this force of necessity, which is really all that has to be said about change. It's justice is necessity, what must be will be, and we know that necessity casts out any form of change because we had the question, is or is not, but we decided there's only is. And because there only is, there can no longer be any talk of it being other than it is. And if you can't have talk of being other than what is, such as one thing becoming what it is not, or what is becoming what is not, you just have is. Necessity is done away with it all. So it's an interesting question. I don't know. I didn't get into a conversation with the guy about where he wanted to go from there, what he was thinking about justice. But he's right. Justice did crop up a second time. And I think it is really important. I didn't harp on it in the last space, but it is important because I think here we've learned that justice, at least in my interpretation, represents something about necessity. And because of necessity, she has that relationship to change or things coming to be and fading away that we saw in Anaximander. But actually, in a Parmenidean system, she's necessity. And so now it's a wholly different system in place. And yeah. So I think that is actually a really important thing to mention. Justice as necessity, as metaphysical necessity, which of course would rule out change. So then we're going to get to the actual start of the space, which is page 3 of Fragment 8 in the Phoenix Pre-Socratics. And so as I've done with the other spaces, I'm going to give this a read through, and I'm going to read it from start to finish. It's one page. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to give my thoughts on it. And if anyone wants to request the mic and share their own thoughts or ask a question, I'm just a person. It's not like I'm the goddess here to answer with the 100% correct interpretation. But if anyone wants to discuss it or share their own thoughts, please just request a mic and I will be happy to have you speak for a while. But let's read it from start to finish. And for those who have just joined, it's up in the nest. Nor is it divisible, since it all alike is. Nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together. Nor is it somewhat less, but it is full, all full of what is. Therefore, it is all continuous, for what is in contact with what is. Moreover, changeless in the limits of great chains, it is unbeginning and unceasing, since coming to be and perishing have been driven far off, and true trust has thrust them out. Remaining the same and in the same, it lies by itself, and remains thus firmly in place, for strong necessity holds it fast in the chains of a limit which fences it about. Wherefore, it is not right for what is to be incomplete, for it is not lacking, but if it were, it would lack everything. Alright, so that's page 3 of Fragment 8 in the Phoenix Pre-Socratics edition. And, just as a way of recap very quickly, as he says here we go. Coming to be and perishing have been driven far off, and true trust has thrust them out. So that's what just occurred, right? So in the previous 2 pages, This idea of generation and destruction has been refuted or cast away by necessity. It's a necessary conclusion that if there only is what there is, then generation and destruction are done away with. But of course that doesn't end the story, right? Because fragment 8 is, on this route there are signs very numerous, ungenerated, imperishable, whole, single-limbed, steadfast, and complete. So we still have to. This is really what I take as the Eleatic project. We have the Eleatic teaching that there just is what there is. There's just is, and now we're just fleshing out the ramifications of that. So in the previous two spaces, we got rid of generation and destruction. Now let's get to this point about divisibility. So that first line, nor is it divisible, since it all alike is. Then it goes on, nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together, nor is it somewhat less, but it is all full of what is. Therefore it is all continuous, for what is in contact with what is. I've talked about my own interpretation, things that I look for in this text. Specifically, I want a reading of Parmenides where being, or what is rich with detail. It has all the meaning that we perceive in the world. It's all there in what is. We got a request for a mic here. We got Ancient. There we go, Ancient. Are you, here we go. It looks like it's updated you to speaker. Did you have any observations or questions, Ancient?
You'll be able to hear me very well because I've been at this park before and I've gotten horrible connection issues.
Well, I'm hearing you okay now.
So just, okay. So I sat somewhere differently than I usually do, and just interrupt me if you can't understand me. So I think the most important thing to begin with here is how you understand
Ancient, you sounded great initially, but you're rugging big time now.
Yeah, sorry, I think we missed a lot of that.
Okay, let me try again. Sorry, just waiting a few seconds in the hope that the connection will get better. Okay, so I think this place to start is how you understand the likeness or the similarity with here. There's several ways you could understand this similarity or likeness. One is homogeneity of parts, or since there are no parts, just homogeneity. So all that is alike to the different subcomponents or whatever we want to call it. That's way. Because in order to be alike, and I think this is true in English as in Greek, you need two things that are comparandums. That is, you need one thing to be compared to another. So what is it exactly so what is the thing that is X that is similar to Y?
Yeah, no, I think that, I don't know if that was for some reason I thought you were going to mention three different things there, but no, that all makes perfect sense to me. It is a question of how we're going to understand. Well, you could also understand, like, the first part is, nor is it divisible. So before we even get to since it all alike is, I think there's two things in that first line that we need to address. It says, nor is it divisible, since all alike is. So you're right. In what sense could it be interpreted as alike? And you gave, firstly, the interpretation that obviously I would run from, the homogeneous one, or the homoeomeros version, which is it's essentially composed of parts that are all interchangeable or identical, if I'm understanding you correctly. So if we say it's all alike, it's like all the water in the ocean is alike. You can just take a cup of water from the Pacific Ocean on one coast and you take it from another coast, and it's interchangeable because it's homogeneous in the sense of homoeomeros. It's all the parts are the same. Obviously, I would not want to say things are that reality solely consists of some interchangeable thing like water. Although I guess maybe we could. I hate to draw the atomists into this because I don't know how relevant that is for a discussion of Parmenides. And the atomists themselves in antiquity, I don't think their atoms were homoeomeros. But that's an interesting discussion. I would run away from the homogeneous interpretation. I would interpret since it all alike is, like you're saying, how are two things alike? They must have some commonality. I say they are alike because they are both subsumed within what is. They both have an affirmative presence. So I am like the table. I am like the table and the computer and this computer and everyone in this space because we are all here in being. We're all present. And every part of us is present. So we are wholly consumed by this sort of metaphysical context or entity. So in that sense, I see it as alike. And I tie it back to the first part of the sentence, which is why I highlight it. Because, again, this is a 2-clause sentence in the translation. Nor is it divisible, since all alike is. If we meant that everything is alike in the sense that water is interchangeable, and that was our meaning, like the molecules of water are all identical, and they constitute the ocean, but they're all, it's all just the same sort of water molecule. So reality would, I guess, be this indistinguishable goop. If that was the case, to make that point, why would we say that nor is it divisible? Because obviously the identical constituent parts are divisible, because that's how we're identifying them, right? We're saying here's a glass of water, it's full of identical water molecules. We're dividing the water molecules and saying there's a molecule, there's a molecule, there's a molecule. So why did we just say nor is it divisible? In what sense can something be alike but indivisible? And I read it as the sense is that we all exist. We're all here. And yes, I can identify myself and the table and the computer and the phone and whatnot. I can identify these as all details of being or of the truth. But I can't divide them out from what is. They're all necessarily contained in or subsumed by what is. So what is really is an indivisible thing. So that's why I read this. I say, look, nor is it indivisible. Well, of course it can't be divided because there only is what is. And how would you take something outside of what is? Where would it go? And aren't you contradicting the first point that there only is what there is? So by necessity, it can't be divided in this ontological or metaphysical sense. And then, since all alike is, well, right, because we are all in what is. So we are all alike in that sense. We're all here. We're all together. We're all bundled together in what is. And we'll never get let go of or released. There's no question of that. So that's... Yeah, I definitely shared some of the thoughts you expressed just then, Ancient, and I was trying to tease it out myself. I definitely attached those 2 clauses of the first line together. But also I have the self-interested perspective of wanting to say that reality is not just an amorphous goop of identical particles or molecules or whatever they call water these days. And so obviously I also had a personal motivation not to interpret it as homogeneous in the sense you said. But I think I found a way to do that, and I think it makes sense. It's just, if there only is what is, then you can't divide anything away from what is, because that would be other than what is. Therefore, everything is alike, because it all is. And then we have, nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together. So again, it's the exact same point, right? It's 2 points, but one of them is the exact same. So the second clause of that sentence, nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together. That point there about keep it from holding together again, I relate that back to that first part, nor is it divisible. Because again, if there only is what there is, we're all alike in the sense that we're all here in what is, then there's no such thing as keeping us from holding together, right? There's no division on that point. And then this other part that's raised in this second sentence, nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together. What does he mean, nor is it somewhat more here? And I take this to be part of his argument against gradation. Because how can something be more inside what is, or more real than anything else? Because we're all here together. I'm not more real than the table, or my ideas, or the computer, or you, or anyone else. We're all here equally and absolutely. So there's no such thing as... I don't know exactly who he's taking aim at here, or the goddess is taking aim at here, but I appreciate that if there only is what is, and it absolutely contains or subsumes all details that we can talk of, and ourselves included in that, then obviously nor is it somewhat more here, because actually it's nowhere in particular, it's everywhere equally and absolutely, this fact of existence. So that's what I took that to be. There's no such thing as something being more or less real. So we did talk about gradation in regards to other pages, and I would chuck that onto the pile of anti-gradation points. And of course, gradation becomes extremely important when I argue or discuss politely philosophy with other people who believe that there is a hierarchy of being or some gradation. And they may have good reasons to say that, but this is one of the lines where I clue in on perhaps a reason to disagree with them. And then the next line of that trio that I read earlier was, nor is it somewhat less, but it is all full of what is. And so again, that first clause, nor is it somewhat less, but it is all full of what is, the nor is it somewhat less is, to me, repeating the point about gradation. It's like, well, nothing is more real, and therefore as well, nothing is less real, because it's all real, absolutely. There's no such thing as an unreal thing. But then the second clause here is really valuable to me. But it is all full of what is. This is the perfect way to tie it all together, and for me to use in my own interpretation of existence as essentially being a perfectly complete whole truth. And then all of the details are of the truth, right? So me, you, whatever, we're all of being. We're all of the truth. It is all full of what is. So what we have done here is we've gone, it's not divisible, since it all alike is. So reality is not divisible because there's all just this one big complete whole, and nothing to separate it. And it's not gradated because you can't be more real or less real. There's nothing that would stop it from holding together. There's no other thing that would stop this. And what we have is, at the end there, it is all full of what is. So when I'm trying to give this interpretation of Parmenides as being an account of reality that is rich of detail, like it has all the detail we experience, it's all there in what is, this is the most beautiful line of all, right? Because it is all full of what is. Well, what is full? Well, presumably being is full. And it's all full of it. It's all full of what is. So being is that which is all full of what is, right? So again, maybe that's a self-interested interpretation of the last line there, but it's like, it's beautiful. It's coming together and saying not only do we have the core teaching of is, but all that is the is full of all that is. It's full of all the detail. But here we go. I see a request from Ancient again. I hope the connection's working better for you. I always value your input. And I also saw Casanova, you had requested the mic. I don't know if you had an observation of your own to toss in, or if you had a question or anything like that. Just let me know.
Yes. Can you guys hear me? Well.
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Perfectly. Thank you for accepting my request. It's my first time here. Actually, it's funny because I was just wondering through Twitter. I think I don't follow anyone from here, but it just got recommended and I just opted in. It seems that this is kind of a early Western approach to the metaphysical aspect of life. Could you correct me on that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'm here to correct people, but I think you're right in two ways. One is an early Western metaphysical text. Yes, he's often, I guess, I'm not sure where you're from, but in terms of metaphysics in the West, I sometimes see him referenced as the father of metaphysics almost. This is a very early thinker, 6th century BC, and essentially, if you go back, so I've been uploading all these to YouTube if you wanted to go and read along and listen along to the whole thing. But yeah, it is a metaphysical treatise from antiquity. And then on the second one, you said, like, as a way of life. That second point, so the author, his name is Parmenides for Velleia, so you got the Eleatics. There are a few Eleatic writers, but they all exist kind of in fragments, and I wouldn't say that you're going to find a lot of specific advice about how to live your life from the Eleatics. But, Parmenides did, they did have their own community, and I'm sure they had their views on how life ought to be led. But that is a little harder to tease out. Their texts are really focused on metaphysical, kind of like system building or metaphysics, and then arguing and refuting others.
Of course. Yeah, that's what I just want to get that clear.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Because for as long as I was here, it got my interest because it pertains the same perception as the Vedic scriptures or the Buddhist scriptures. I don't know if anyone here has dived into it, but we see a lot of that concept on that approach of the one soul of the entire creation, let's say, that ether behind creation, and that is what got me intrigued, because this what is, and that it is the same and is not more or less here and there. It kind of gives the impression, and that is why I asked to speak, to put this over here, because if you search into it and make the comparison, it is somewhat similar. And the early philosophers and the early yogis, they all add similar inputs in regards to this. You can go to China, you can go to India, Greece. They all have similar ideas and concepts. Over here we talk about the is. In India we talk about the what is the name? Now I'm not remembering, but in China it was the Tao. So it is all about the supreme beingness, and beyond this, that is the beingness that makes up the life. And it's not just about matter, but it is about the ether, the energy that pervades and permeates every bit of the creation. So I think it's what Parmenides was kind of trying to pass on to the people, to his disciples. I don't know if it was his disciples or his students, but I think it was his effort over here to talk about that beingness that makes up everything the same, because everything is just the same as, let me try to make an example. Let's say we have gold. I have a gold chain and I have a gold tooth. Both of them are gold, but they have different forms. They are the same matter, but they are made into different shapes. And I think that over here, Parmenides was trying to make up that idea that everything is the same, everything is made of the same ether, the same energy that bounds and makes up everything. but it's just in different shapes and forms and matter. But let me know what you think.
Yeah, if you are interested in authors that compare Indian works to Parmenides, I know of one because she wrote an essay in a text that was about another Eleatic thinker. If you look up Chiara Robiana, I'm not going to say I agree with her about everything, but she writes about an author I'm less familiar about, or I know nothing about him at all actually, called Sankara. And so she writes essays comparing Parmenides and Sankara. And I think if you look further into Parmenides or into these general debates, I don't know how much you look into it, but the authors find plenty of things to disagree and dispute about, such as, for example, whether the configuration. So you said like a gold chain is configured differently than a gold tooth, but they're both gold. Well, one of the challenges about metaphysics is their shape as well is something, right? So the shape of a chain and the shape of gold. And so what is not just like gold in that it can be reshaped. What is actually beyond all particular meaning. So if the shape has significance, which it does because it can be the shape of a chain or shape of a tooth, every bit of significance is one in being, right? And so it's not that being is a prime material that can be reshaped, and then we have all these different shapes that are not material per se. But actually, what he's getting at, I think, is something that subsumes even shapes and configurations. But no, I think I get what you're getting at, and that is interesting. I do want to let Ancient speak because he was speaking earlier, and then he had connection issues and he dropped out. I hope we can let Ancient speak now if it works for him. But thank you, Casanova.
I appreciate you.
Let's see. Maybe it's not working for Ancient now. That's unfortunate. If everyone sees Ancient Philosophy's account there, he's definitely worth a follow. He's a very high quality account. Here we go. He's got the mic now. Let's see if he can hear.
Yeah, sorry, I keep getting cut off from the audio. I can't hear anyone, then I have to rejoin. So I wanted to return to the text again. And so you explained one way that you took the likeness to be, but I don't know if that's completely compelling. I mean, everything I say, keep in mind, I'm for your perspective. I'm not sure if that's what you want to say. One reason is it seems like your perspective might multiply the entities in the world, which you don't want to do. And one way I mean that is that when if you grant from your perspective, there is thing here and that thing there, and then there is, so to speak, a being in which they are a part. Well, what you have just done is you've outdid the pluralist. The pluralist already grants that there's X, Y, and Z, however many there are, and you've granted that, so you already have that problem of plurality. One up them by adding this thing being, of which they are all in a part. So that seems to me one reason why you might not want to go there. Other thing is this. I think what line is this? 27. Yeah, I think it's 20. The likeness line is 27. I wonder if we could say the likeness, the two things that are alike, are being and thought. So that when he says, since everything is like or isness, the implied likeness is supposed to be the way you are thinking of it, or the thought that is. So that we've already seen this in Parmenides, that there's this parallel between thought and being. So that when he's saying that there, all he's saying is that everything is like the way that it is thought, or the way you were thinking of it this very moment when I'm putting it into your mind. And one advantage of this is that it would eliminate that pluralism worry that I was talking about earlier. Another thing that's sort of interesting, later on, your translation for, I think, 30, I remember what, did it say true belief pushes them away?
Yeah, it says true trust has thrust them out. Yeah, true trust has thrust them out.
True trust, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Trust is interesting, but whatever. So pistis, the word there, however we translate that, there is no them there. It's just pistis pushes them, a true pistis push them off, but there is no off. So what's interesting there is that the grammar matches sort of Parmenides' doctrine. That is, he doesn't even grant them the grants of the ontological existence which he is denying. So it's not that. So the reason I went to this secondarily is that it does seem like there is something with even at the grammatical level that he uses to parallel and reinforce what he's saying.
Yeah, I don't know if you had more to add, Ancient. Was that did you have more to add, or no? I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, but not on that topic. That seemed to me one single thought.
Okay, well, so I'll just jump in very quickly then and let you get to the third thought then. So you mentioned I may have one-upped the pluralists, and I mean, I think that's worthy of its own longer discussion of how I've one-upped them and whether I want to one-up them, but ultimately I don't see myself as leading myself into a trap or a problem if I say that there's just the whole truth being, and it's full of what is, to borrow that third line down in the Phoenix Pre-Socratics. So we just have the whole truth, and all that is said is of the truth. You are of the truth, I am of the truth. There is just reality as this one entity. And, we're in that entity. We are that entity. And how are we describing it? Well, literally everything is a description of it. Literally everything is truth, because there is just the whole truth. And then it gives us the benefit of saying, and this is a nice benefit, I guess, but it's a different discussion. But it's a nice benefit of saying, where my words fall apart or where they fall short, well, it's not the whole truth, right? So whatever limited observation we make, whatever narrower observation or narrower presence we have or that we are, we will, of course, be less than the whole truth, and we'll have to assume that there are errors or shortcomings. So yeah, I don't think I've fallen into a trap or a problem, but it's worth a longer discussion, maybe not rooted in the text, but more like a general philosophical discussion, where if one has the worldview that reality is just one single entity, the whole truth, and that all is of the truth, or that the whole truth is full of what is, I just feel like I'm on good stable ground there. It's not really an argument against what you said. It's just more like if I was to encounter that challenge that I'm one-upping the pluralists or I'm worse than the pluralists, I just say, well, no, I'm saying that reality is just one thing, and all that is said is of that one thing. It's of the whole truth. And to the extent that we say something more narrow, we just kind of drop off some truth.
Yeah, I think, so outside of interpreting this line, I think maybe the general way I would phrase it is knowing and being are the same thing. This is Parmenides himself. So knowing and being are the same thing. Speaking or using words is just a mode of thinking. And so by the very fact that you're using words to distinguish and differentiate different things, you are thereby, or at least according to Parmenides, multiplying the number of entities that there are. So I think that would be maybe the strongest way of saying, how is it, Parmenides, that you can posit your particular kind of monism given this thought that knowing and being are the same thing?
Right. So there's two ways I would go down there. One is a different interpretation of why one might say that thinking and being are the same, because maybe they're just simply pointing out that all these discussions or thoughts or everything we know, it's not separated from what is. It's not separated from the whole truth. It is within the whole truth. It's like saying, trying to think of one smaller thing subsumed by another that we might handle as if it were outside it. I just interpret that. It comes later in the text, like on the next page of the Phoenix Pre-Socratics. And there were some sections that were prior to this section as well that we already went over. But yeah, I would just say, like, on that first point about how to understand thinking is being, I don't view it as saying that all there is to being is thought, or I would never interpret it as any way of having parallel tracks of thinking and being, obviously. I just viewed it as a reminder that, whatever you're thinking about, just like everything else, it has to be. There's no other exclusionary place where it could go. So thinking is being. It's the same as being, just like everything is the same as being. Because there's just one entity, the whole truth, and everything is of the whole truth. So that's the road I go down in that. There's a couple of sections in the fragments that say that very similar language. Again, one is the next page, but we also have it was like fragment 7, was it? Kind of, but also fragment 6. There we go, fragment 6 at the start. But that's my reading of it. And then there was something I really wanted to say on the other part you made. Oh, right. So you said like we would be multiplying things. And I think that if someone said to me, look, thought is being, and you're having all these new thoughts, therefore you're multiplying stuff, I think there's just an earlier discussion that we kind of did in the last spaces where I don't believe there's any multiplying going on. Because I think everything is perfectly complete, because reality is perfectly complete, right? And so the chronology is perfectly complete. So my life, from my birth to my death, or multiple deaths, or however we want to structure time, whether it's branching or linear, that's all already there. So it's not like I'm coming up with new thoughts and generating or multiplying being. And I understand that there are many, many, many people, and they have many, many, many thoughts. And this means that being is just becoming more and more and more detailed, right? Because it's just one thing, and everything is of the truth, of that whole truth. And therefore, if we have many people and many ideas, well, now the whole truth just contains more and more ideas. But I just view that as a good thing, because I want a reality full of meaning, whatever meaning I perceive, or whatever is possible is necessary. And so I don't think I'm generating new being by having thoughts, because I think that my life is a complete whole, just like the whole truth is complete, because I am of the whole truth, and the whole truth is a complete and perfect single entity. So I don't think any multiplication or new things are being added. But I do appreciate that if a lot of ideas can be said, then there's going to be a lot of meaning in the whole. But for me, that's almost a benefit. I like that.
Well, the direction though wouldn't be this, that you are naming and speaking all these different things, and that therefore creates some kind of metaphysical magic that creates these things. Rather, the idea would be that the way language works is these things must be out there and differentiated from each other in some way, or else when you named them and spoke about them, we wouldn't be able to conceptualize them or have any reference to what these different things are. So how is it then, given that that's the case, that you as a monist have any right to say, here is a man and here is a dog, or here's one man and here's a second man? Because for example, a non-monist has some rights, or at least within the consistency of his own system, to say, I can tell you what the being of a dog is, and I can tell you what the being of a man is, and how they differ. But what you have been telling me, there is in fact no distinguishing factor. What right of logic does the Parmenidean have to distinguish or individuate anything if all is alike in this way of being?
Well, all is alike in that it is of the whole truth, right? It's all alike in that it is subsumed by this single metaphysical entity. And then the question is, well, what is this single metaphysical entity? And I can analogize it to something like a painting, right? Because a painting will have many images depicted on it. So there'll be like a painting of people dancing around in a circle. And I can say the dancer on the left side of the painting is distinct from the dancer on the right side of the painting. So the painting is the whole truth. And all that is depicted, all the materials used to construct it, everything about it, is of it, right? So this single metaphysical entity, again, it's single because there is nothing beyond what is. It just is what is. And then we say, what is what is? Well, it's literally, how do we get from the third line of this poem, third line of the fragment section we're on? It is all full of what is. So it is just full of all existence. That's what it is. And then you say, well, how can you distinguish the dancer on the left from the dancer on the right if they're both being? Well, it's true that when I say the dancer on the left, I am describing being. And when I say the dancer on the right, I am describing being. But again, what is being? Being is full of what is full of all possible detail. Whatever is possible, whatever is coherent, is true and real. And the dancer is the dancer on the left. And the dancer on the right is the dancer on the right. They are both what they are in their own right. And being, this single entity, is just like a painting. It's this grand amalgamation of all the details. That is what it is. So I don't know if that leads to more challenges or an identification of some contradiction I've made, but that is the way I would analogize it, is to a detailed single object. So if I can get away with it, I would just say, the whole truth is as if a painting, and the painting has all the details and materials, and whatever is possible is necessary in its breadth. And then someone says, well, how do you... Okay, so it's all part of the painting. But if that's all you can say about it, how do you know the dancer on the left is the left and the dancer on the right's on the right? And I'd say, well, the left is the left and the right is the right. That's by definition. We're just saying something of the whole. So, I hope that is maybe not satisfactory, but at least a path that some people could see how I'm treading it.
This opening line here, nor is it divisible, since it is all alike, or it all alike is. It seems to me there are at least two very important ideas that Parmenides is advocating for. One of them is that, as opposed to those who say that there is something called non-existence, or non-existence is, he says no, everything is. So his side, and then there's these other people who say there's also this thing called non-existence. So that's one thing. But the other thing, another position that he's advocating, is that there is only one thing instead of many things. So those are two separate ideas, even if they do obviously interact and are necessary for Parmenidean theory. But is there one of those two, so multiplicity and, say, existence, that you think this opening line has in mind, that it has one of those two ideas more in mind, and that of what it's denying here?
The first one. Oh, yeah. Sorry, hold on. Holistic requested a mic. I'll give you the mic, Holistic, but then I'm going to answer Ancient and let him have a chance to speak before I have you speak. The Ancient, so as you were saying, I think it goes to, so that opening line, nor is it divisible since it all alike is, I think that goes to the first of the two you mentioned, which is the Parmenides is faced with a bunch of guys who are saying, well, there is and there is not. There's two paths, right? And he's saying, no, there's just one path. And so what I think he's done, though, specifically is denied that there was ever any talk of two paths in the first place, because that's what the goddess does, right? She doesn't just say there is a path of what is and there's a path of is not. I don't like the path of is not. No, it's literally that the double-headed mortals are confused and they name two when there's one. And essentially that supposed second thing they're mentioning is really subsumed in the first, that it is. So to the extent that the second path ever had any meaning, ever posed anything beyond a string of letters, it goes onto the first path, that it is. Because, we don't name two when we ultimately we have one. And so then, when we get to this section here, nor is it divisible since it all alike is, this is like the page prior. I hate to go to a page prior that you don't have up on the screen there, but it's essentially why was justice in her necessity eliminating generation and perishing? Well, because the decision about these matters depends on this, is or is not, but it has been decided, as is necessary, to let go the one is unthinkable, unnameable, for it is no true root, but to allow the other so that it is and true. So right before the section we're discussing now, not right before, but within the same fragment and a few lines prior, justice has been on our side. Necessity is forcing all of our conclusions because of the first thing you mentioned, the is versus is not. And is not was, to the extent it was legitimate, it is. To the extent that we would say anything beyond that about it, it's just a string of words. There's no second path. And so then we get to, nor is it divisible since it all alike is. I say it's about the first one because it's not divisible, because there's no two paths, there's nowhere else to put it. There's no way of divvying it up in any ontological is versus is not dichotomy. There's just is, and therefore it's not divisible. And it all alike is, because wherever we're pointing at, whatever we're doing, whatever we are, is. It's all alike. It's on that one path of is. And then that gets into your second option, which was, how can you, the one monistic entity that then has many details, which I don't want to go off track because I already answered your question. But yeah, I think it goes to the first part. The necessity and the reason why it all alike is, and it's not divisible, is direct necessary result enforced by justice or necessity because of how we banished any talk of the second path, which was no true path at all. I hope that kind of answers it.
And then the next line, that it's not somewhat more here because that would prevent it from hanging together, etc. You take that as continuing on this line of denying that there is non-existence.
Yeah, so I take the, so there's two lines there that I would take together, which is, the whole fragment kind of hangs together, but it says, nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together, nor is it somewhat less, but it is all full of what is. I take that to be an argument against I kind of went over multiple ways of meaning I took from it, but yeah, to your point, I take that as a refutation of any gradation, because there's no non-existence or extra divine existence that could be mixed in to make it more real in some location than another, or less real in some location than another. It's just pure in terms of its existential reality. It's pure and absolute in unquestionable existence. It just is. So yeah, I take those lines. I mentioned a few ways I take them earlier in the space, but yeah, I do take them in a big way to be about a rejection of gradation. Because I also believe that existence is like a well-poured substance, right? It's like it evenly covers everything. It envelops and threads through everything evenly and absolutely, because there only is and there's no other, there's nothing else that could be introduced to pervert or, spoil it in any way. And again, he says, it is all full of what is. You can't keep it from holding together. I linked that back to the original bit about divisibility. I almost want to read that second clause of the nor is it somewhat more here, which would keep it from holding together, as almost an attack on, it's not, but just like what I'm feeling right now is maybe kind of an attack on, I don't even know if it makes sense for Parmenides' time, but I guess it's from the goddess, right? So she knows all times and would have a better knowledge base. People who would split God and creation, as if one were more real, like the divine is more real, and then somehow separate from the mortal here. The conversation is taking place beyond the mortal realm, but it's almost like saying, A, gradation is false. It can't be more or less real. B, that means you can't have a divine realm that's separated off from us and is not held just as equally here together, bound up in being. I don't know if I'm reading way too much with that last thought there, but that's almost my temptation as well if I had to pick a target for it. But I don't know if that target would be historically likely.
That's what I would hesitate to do, because that seems to be anticipating Plato, for one. But also, I'm not sure, to use your word gradation, I am not sure how gradation would differ from Parmenides saying that if something differs in quality or attribute, then that is equivalent to being different in existence. On your reading, would he be able to say that something can be different than something else in a quality or attribute, without committing to saying that's some kind of differentiation in existence?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I would say that by my interpretation of him and my understanding of this text, that something can be different in the sense that it has different attributes, or it's a different thing, or however we want to structure the specifics, like is it going to be a world of matter and form or whatever. Things can be different in that sense, but they cannot be different in the fact that they are of the truth. Because, reality is this one complete entity, being, or the steadfast heart of persuasive truth. And then, to the extent we can say anything about it, it all is genuine existence, right? Everything that seems to be is just as real, and here it is all alike in the sense that it is of the whole truth. So yeah, to answer your question specifically, I agree with you, or at least I agree that my position is, per Parmenides, we can distinguish things like the pen and the table and the mouse and the phone and the things in front of me. But we cannot, and so we would just say these are all details of the whole truth, because the whole truth is, per the last line, full of what is, right? It's full of all the details. And then we cannot say that any of these things are less real or less existent or non-existent or extra existent. I think sometimes I don't encounter it so much these days. Maybe I'm just reading different things and talking to different people, but I used to encounter interpretations of Parmenides all the time which were very meme-like. It was like, well, Parmenides is denying all possible differentiation or meaning. Reality is just a monotone hum or a amorphous blob of goo within which there can be no distinguishing any meaning. And those interpretations, to the limited extent I did them justice, I'm sure the people who believe that would say it better than I did, but those interpretations to me are the least acceptable regarding Parmenides, because even though they are monistic in the sense that reality is just this one thing, like a hum or a blob of undifferentiated goo, you can no longer even have the fragments. You can't have a goddess, you can't have a maiden You can't have these maidens and their chariot taking the youth to see the goddess. You can't have justice opening the gate and enforcing necessity upon their conclusions. You can't have any of this because reality is just an amorphous blob and there is just what there is. And so those are the people that would say to your question, no, I deny any differentiation even in the details, let alone just on existence. I deny any detailed differentiation. Those people are the least acceptable to me because then I don't think we even have a poem. I don't think there's a conversation to begin with. That's why I think being must be full of, like, rich with detail. Just like the poem is rich with detail. So I hope that makes sense. But Ancient, feel free to make any observations you have, or if you had any other points to make or anything of that nature. I do see we have a couple of new speakers, but let's give Ancient a chance to say anything if he had anything left to say.
Yeah, but I'd prefer we go to someone else.
Okay, perfect. So Holistic and EM1, glad to see you both here. Holistic, you had requested the mic first, so by justice, I will ask you to speak first.
Yeah. So this is what I would say on you and Ancient's discourse. Something I've noticed about the criticisms about both Parmenides and Heraclitus. And they do seem like fair criticisms, and I'm not even saying they're wrong. But they do seem to get a lot of the same criticisms that Pyrrho and the Pyrrhonic skeptics seem to get. And the way I would reconcile both of y'all's views, and I know we don't have the entirety of Parmenides' poem. We don't have the, on opinion, which is essentially, as far as I can tell, on the way of appearances. And the way you could distinguish one thing from another, from an Iliadic point of view, if you are Parmenides, is that you can submit to the differences in reality. If it's not the true being of reality, because it's just an appearance, it's just a fantasia, it's just your pathos, you have no choice but to submit to the changes of appearance, even if it's not the real being. And I'm curious if you think that's a fair interpretation, if you think that's a fair way to reconcile it, even though we don't have the whole dialogue.
Well, it's sort of two questions there of whether it's a fair way to read the poem, which I'm less inclined to just say, no, you can't have that interpretation. I mean, there are interpretations of Parmenides that make him a dualist, right? There's Neoplatonic interpretations of this text that he just becomes a dualist with a real world of eternal being and a realm of shadows. And that kind of sounded similar. I'm referencing Simplicius and others there. But it kind of sounded similar to what you were saying, Holistic, which is a reading whereby there is the whole truth or being or the, what is. And then there are these appearances of just what seems to be to us. And it's not like you couldn't compare or analogize that to the same sort of interpretations we see in Neoplatonists and others. But I would never adopt it because, you've almost violated that point about there is or there is not. Oops, second path is not real, it all is. So where are you putting your appearances then? Because if we're saying, like, okay, there's reality, there's the whole truth, and then I'm sitting here, well, one, where am I sitting? I am of the truth. I'm in that one metaphysical entity, as are all the details. And then you say, well, then I have appearances that I can acquiesce to or not acquiesce to, but they are just thrust upon me, even if they're not true. It's like, for me, my concern is, well, if they're not true, where are they or what are they? You're kind of breaking my model. So I would never follow you in making a two-tiered reality of the truth as what is, or being, and then a world of appearances that are thrust upon us but are not accurate. I would just say no.
Well, when it comes to the way I would answer that, when it comes to where are they, well, they're just appearances. They're not the actual being that would even be the being. So why do they have to be anywhere in any way
Well, how are you talking
Doesn't
about them?
goddess give you a way of inquiring about reality anyway? I don't know the exact passages, but I feel like if we had the entire dialogue of both Heraclitus and Parmenides, they would be very much fellow travelers to a lot of the way. I feel like they might even reconcile fully. It's just my rank speculation, but I see a lot of similarities to Sextus Empiricus and Pyrrho in the way they are describing things. So I'm starting to realize that I'm growing way more sympathetic to Parmenides when I'm reading some of these criticisms. But yeah, why does appearance have to be anything in any way? Like, it's just an appearance.
So a couple of things. So you mentioned an interesting point you said was like if we rediscover the dialogues. I mean, not the dialogues. The lost works or fragments. If we recovered all the work of Heraclitus or Parmenides, and had a broader knowledge of what they wrote, we'd have a different perspective. Maybe they'd be more reconciled. If we ever do dig up the complete work of Parmenides, I imagine a lot of feathers are going to get ruffled, and many interpretations will. I mean, it would just open up a whole, not can of worms, but an enormous amount of scholarship would take place. I think people would be very excited to see it. People would be then going on to have interpretations of now the complete text that are different. So you'd have like different interpretations of the completed text. And people would fight about that too. It'd be very exciting. But I'm sure different takes would come to light, and some takes would fall away. For Heraclitus, I think you remember Holistic. I said something about I don't like the meme version of Parmenides, where reality is just one big goop, like ball of goop without meaning. It's just a single meaningless entity. I think Heraclitus also gets turned into a bit of a meme where everything is flux and nothing can be said beyond that. I'm not saying who says that, but yeah.
Well, Heraclitus even people do like just say, "Oh, everything is just in flux, everything," but he also talks about being and the logos and stuff. And Parmenides, here's just one thing because I have the quote pulled up here from not the way of truth, the way of opinion from the goddess. He talks about, and this might be like the more appearance state, the way to inquire about the appearance. If you can't inquire about the actual being, it says the structure of the cosmos is a fundamental binary principle that governs the manifestations of all particulars. So this would be the quote right here, quote, "The ether fire of flame, which is gentle, mild, soft, thin, and clear, in self identical, and the other is ignorant night, body thick and heavy." Now that sounds to me more sort of getting into Heraclitus like, but that's just more of the incomplete fragment, so we don't know exactly what they're saying. But it sounds to me like the goddess is like providing a way to continue to inquire about, even if it is just an appearance, even if it is just a fantasia.
I would.
So I don't know.
I would recommend. So we'll get to the fragments on seeming. I will go through all the fragments we have of Parmenides, like the direct quotes. So we will go through the what we have of the way of seeming. Just very quickly to your point about like why do we have a way of seeming? There are a few places where we get some clues. I mean, you remember the proem, so you can go straight to the last line of the proem, or the last 4 or 5 lines of the proem, where she says, it is right you should learn all things, beliefs are mortals, and they have to have genuine existence. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, cutting a bit out there, but yeah, so you see, she says not only is she going to tell the youth about the truth, but she's also going to tell him about the opinions of mortals, and how they had to have genuine existence, which of course in my interpretation is you're going to learn all these opinions about the world. You're going to learn how, to the extent they have any meaning, it must be existence. It must be is. But that's my interpretation without any argument. And then the other clue you're going to get is the very end of Fragment 8. Well, actually, it's going to be the first fragment. The beginning of Fragment 2, where she tells the youth, "Come, I'll tell you, and do you listen and convey the story?" So she's like telling him this is the first hint that he's going to have to go back. He needs to remember what's going on. Like, pay attention, kid. And then, not you, but the youth that she's talking about. And then at the end of Fragment 8, she says, regarding the way of seeming, all this arrangement I proclaim to you as plausible. Thus, no opinion of mortals shall ever overtake you. So she says, I'm going to tell you all of the latest science. You're going to learn about the powers of science and how it says what it says about everything. So you can go back down there and, I don't know, I guess you can go push around all the scientists if they give you a hard time when you present the truth as I've presented it to you. So there's another reason for the way of seeming. It's to armor him against the counterattacks he'll get when he returns home. He's kind of come out of the cave, he's received the truth, and now he's going back down into the cave, and he's armed with the knowledge to defeat whoever was left behind and kind of bring them to the light. If I can obviously mirror Plato there. But let's give thank you, Holistic. Let's give EM1 a chance to speak. It's you know what, I shouldn't laugh. We got through 3 lines here, and it has been a very good discussion. I'm very happy with the way the space has gone. So even though I will probably end it after EM1 speaks, the next time we do this space, it will also be on this same page, but it'll just be we'll have been gone through the 3 pages. EM1, three lines. EM1, please feel free to add whatever you would like.
Yeah, thanks, Guijuan. I'm kind of confused on some of these concepts. So some of it sounds similar to Christianity, in the sense that, like, you have the whole painting, and we can say that that's God, and then you have the distinctions between as you put it, the one dancer on the painting that's distinct from the one on the opposite side of the painting, and these are all the features of life. So I guess this is kind of the vein that I'm thinking in, but I was just going to ask you with a question, like an oyster and the oyster's shell, right? The oyster can't survive without its shell, but do you think Parmenides would think of the oyster as the oyster itself, or the oyster and the shell? And I'm just asking because I think that it's more of a spiritual, is there a soul kind of question that I'm kind of mining from this.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I got a few things to say. I don't know if my answer is going to be that satisfactory to you. I think the oyster is a reference to the dialogue, right? But so the first thing I would say is you mentioned if the whole painting is God. Maybe, obviously I don't speak Greek, but in these Eleatic works, I don't see being or the whole truth as being termed God or the divine one. Like the 2 main Eleatics, of course, Parmenides and Melissus. I say main in the sense that they're well preserved and from that time period. The Melissus, the text is very secular. He does call it the one, but it's not like a god. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't feel hunger. It doesn't, he doesn't really call it God. And Parmenides as well, we have gods, like we have the goddess, we have the maidens who are presumably divine in some way, and we have the justice who's playing that role we discussed earlier in the space. But yeah, I would hesitate to say that in interpreting Eleatic fragments we should call being God. But in your favor, I will admit that since at least Plato's time, there was some sort of connection drawn between Xenophanes and Parmenides, and of course Xenophanes, in speaking about an unshaking entity that moves all else, that is for him some sort of theological point or some divine point. So I guess there may be some way to draw God into a relationship with being in this sense, but I would caution against it. I certainly don't do it. I don't think being is God. Now, when you said, would Parmenides think the oyster is its shell, or just the entity within it? There's 2 ways I would go with that. It's an interesting question because Parmenides is not in the business of divvying up what is, right? I mean, what we usually see in these Eleatic fragments is we first get the establishing that there just is what is. There just is. We see that in Parmenides, where they knock out, what the goddess says right off the bat, like, I'm going to teach you well-rounded, steadfast heart of truth, and I'm going to tell you how everything else has to have genuine existence, therefore be part of that truth. And then, of course, is or is not, knock out is not. So the first part of the text is always just about establishing that there only is what there is. And then, same with Melissus. It's like, what's the opening line for Melissus? I'm going to, I don't have it in front of me, but he basically says, I'm going to talk about something as if it is, because how else am I supposed to talk about it, right? There's only one way to talk about stuff, that it is. And so, again, that's usually the first part. And then what happens is they tease out the ramifications of that. And so when we get down to the point of, well, now let's talk about particulars. What does Parmenides think is the oyster, the entity inside or the shell? I would hate to even guess. I would just say that's almost, for me, like, I build out a system that goes beyond just the metaphysical initial observation of is and then the immediate ramifications. For me, I just say, both the oyster and the shell exist, obviously, just like everything exists, and then it's just a question of scope. That's a lazy answer. Like, you can just narrow in on the entity inside, you can zoom out a bit, and you can have the shell and the entity, just like looking at the painting. You see the two dancers and how they relate. As you zoom out, there's more meaning, which gets to the more interesting part that I think I raised briefly with Ancient as to what I saw as an advantage of my viewpoint, which was, when you give limited details, you're inherently falling short of the whole truth, right? So there's going to always be some sort of problem or something lacking or something missing from your observations if they're particular. Because only the whole truth is the truth, right? And all the details are of the truth. And insofar as they are not the whole truth, then, they lack in some way. But so if we just talked about an oyster as the entity inside the shell, you can do that. But as you hinted at, EM1, you're missing the rest of the picture. And so your account, therefore, has a shortcoming, right? It has a failing. It has some sort of, in a sense, falsehood, right? I mean, it is false in the sense that it is not the whole truth. Only the whole truth is the truth, writ large. So, yeah, I think that is an interesting point about would he consider the animal inside the shell to be the oyster? Well, he could speak about it that way, but he's going to say that it's not the whole truth. And so in some sense it is falsehood. I guess I'm repeating myself at this point, but I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for your explanation, Pudafon. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Always a pleasure to see you. The Holistic, you have your hand up. I do have to dash, but let's have you ask a question or make an observation or say what you would like.
Yes, I suspected you had to go, so I'll make it quick. Ancient, if you want to do a space after this, I'd love to get your takes on some of this. But Mr. Tweetafon, you were in, I listened to Bill Crystal Groiper's space a while back, and he did a space on skepticism a while ago. And I remember you liked the way he was talking about the Greek skepticism more as a method of avoiding disquietude rather than a true, like, just modern skepticism. Oh, how can I even know? More as a methodology. You seem to like that, the way he was talking about that. And I'm curious if you think that it's possible, I'm not saying it's true, but you think it's possible that with the goddess, if we had all of this, the entire dialogue, it might ultimately end up in a way whereas Pyrrho wouldn't deny that justice exists. He would suspend judgment on the true nature of justice, because at least right now seems to be unknowable to him. But also at the same time, it doesn't really matter, because he's going to get his justice in the best way possible anyway, because he's just going to submit to tradition and convention in and just listen to his parents, because why not do that? That's what he's always done. So do you think when the goddess might be telling people, like, how do you inquire? Why would she even be going into all of this stuff? Everything really is just being. Why even talk about on the way of opinion, on the way of appearances? Anyway, do you think it might be sort of like similar to Greek skepticism in a way, as a method for achieving ataraxia and avoiding dispute over stuff that may be unknowable?
Yeah.
Last thing, is being knowledge. That's the question. Is being knowledge, and it would have to be universal, as I understand it, right? And I know those were two questions, so maybe another time we can pick it back up.
Is being knowledge. So I hate to just say yes, being is knowledge, because, you know, whatever modicum of significance you can identify, I'm just going to say it's being, right? Because being is full of all that is, and there's nothing beyond being, so whatever we have to talk about is being. And so do we have knowledge to talk about? Yeah, but then we're going to have to define what we mean by knowledge and what role it has in our model of reality. But however it shakes out, sure, knowledge is being. But if we're flipping that or taking it in an absolute sense of, do I believe in some sort of model where literally everything I point at or perceive and that I am in my own right falls under the label or category of knowledge? I don't really have that model. I don't know to what extent it matters. I mean, maybe an idealist can come in here and tell us that all is mind, in which case, yes, being is mind. But that's almost like a later question of trying to divvy up or describe the particular details of what is and whether we can categorize it all as knowledge. For me, being is just all significance whatsoever. Regarding the skeptics and Bill Crystal Groyper's space, I think I remember the space you mentioned. I don't remember all the details, but I want to say Alejandro might have been the one that really gave the not moralistic reading, but the commentary about why they might do what they do and what personal benefits they saw to it in terms of ataraxia leading to some sense of peace with all the differences they saw. I have to confess I'm not really that well read on the skeptics. They come later than the period I usually look at. I do look at people like Sextus Empiricus, but obviously I'm self-interested in it, and I approach them as a way of preserving other authors and commenting on them. So you mentioned Piero. I mean, he's obviously lost for the most part, but I'm afraid for me to say anything meaningful about the skeptics, I would just have to revisit the topic, read some more of their material, and maybe partake in another space. Because for me, the skeptics, I don't think you can be ambivalent about the truth, right? Because there is only the truth. So how are you ambivalent about it? It is what it is. Whatever you perceive, whatever comes upon you, it's all real, 100% real. If a ghost appears in front of you, then a ghost is appearing in front of you. The only question is, how do you describe it correctly? How do you model it correctly? Everything is real. You can't deny it. Like, if you felt something, you felt it. Now it's up to you to figure out how to come to grips with it and decide how to express what it was you felt. Yeah.
Well, here's what I would say. This is what Piero or Sextus would say, and I think you might even agree. I mean, if being would have to be, if you seem to say it was knowledge, which would mean it would have to be universal to be true knowledge. The second mode of, or I think it's Agrippa's second mode of skepticism, and also Nicodemus' second mode, would be on the differences of opinions and appearances among different people. So the way you could, maybe you just have a different, maybe your senses are deceiving you, or you're looking at it wrong way, or maybe it's a dream, and that could be just one way out of many. I could see how you could be incorrect just for submitting to an incorrect appearance, because your senses are not they're not perfect. You're going to be wrong sometimes. So I don't know how can you, what is the criteria, like what would be the criterion for if for being wrong, if everything would just be, can you be wrong, can you ever be wrong?
It would be a direct contradiction, right? To be wrong would be like a contradiction. Like you said, your senses can deceive you. Well, surely you're not saying that your senses can deceive that you had a sense. Like, that's not what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying that.
Right. And so
you're having a sense, but the true nature of the sense, the nature of the being, is what would be unknowable, at least at the moment. That's what the skeptics would say. That's why they would suspend judgment and advance arguments on both sides in order to hopefully get closer to the truth. But they would say that they don't have a criterion even for defining the truth at this point.
But they agree. Well, they do have a criterion from the truth in the sense that they admit that they had the sensation, right?
Yeah, but that could just easily just be a fantasia. That could just be.
Well, what do they mean fantasia?
That's not true. That's not true knowledge, because it's not universally true because of the differences of opinions among different schools of people and skepticism. I mean, not skepticism, different, like Heraclitus and Parmenides. They would both differ on this question, and nobody would say either of them is retarded or dumb. They're both very smart. But if they're both disagreeing, then what gives one the superiority over the other? What is the criterion for that?
I think that the actual point I was pushing there doesn't have an answer from you, in the sense that when I first asked you, are they denying that they have a sensation in the first place? You said, no, they don't deny this. Okay, so it's true, they have the sensation.
They assent to that.
Yeah, they assent to that. Okay. So these subsequent discussions they have is almost, in my mind, just a discussion of how to coherently understand that sensation or to describe it. But that they had it, that there is truth, is really not in dispute here. It's just, are they doing a good job of describing it, or could they have to give up and call it? I mean, even calling it a phantasm is fine. If you want to call the sensation a fantasy, that's fine. But a fantasy is something. You still had the fantasy. So to the extent that they have trouble coming up with models, or they are very good at attacking other people's models, yeah, that's also kind of like the Eleatics, right? You have Zeno going around basically dunking on everyone and saying, look, if that's how you describe mobility, or you describe motion rather, or divisibility, well, here are all the troubles. Ha ha, gotcha. So yeah, the skeptics clearly are related to Eleatics in some sense in that way. But I don't see them as effectively denying that what is.
Well, so let me try the classical example, because I was trying to be a bit too cute maybe. Like, so yes, you can submit to an appearance of something without assenting to knowing the true nature of the thing. Like the classic example would be, I don't deny that the honey does taste sweet, but is the honey sweet? Is the tarantula tasty? I would never deny that the tarantula does have a taste. But from my perspective, in appearing to me, it actually seems disgusting at the moment. But a China person would be like, yeah, that's actually tastes like chicken. That's amazing from his perspective. So that would be one way you can assent to appearances, fine. And why would you not? I mean, it appears that way. Why not do that anyway? But the true nature of the tarantula, does it taste like chicken? Is the honey sweet? Is the flame hot right now? Or if you were in Antarctica, would it not be hot? And what gives either one of those positions superiority over the other? Like,
who says
that would be sort of why they would suspend judgment. The true nature of the honey. Like,
yeah, but who's talking about true nature? Who's talking about true nature? I mean, what is this, like some sort of platonic form of the tarantula?
Well, yeah, so that would be knowledge. Like, knowledge would have to be universally true in all ways for all people all the time, and that would be being, right?
No, okay, so this is why when you said, is being knowledge, I indicated, look, being is any modicum of significance you can point out. Like, whatever you think reality is, I'm going to say that's being, right? But as to whether it is true, knowledge,
I guess
is being,
would be a better question.
It is the whole truth. It is what is. If truth is defined as what is, then yeah, being is the whole truth. But it is the truth. But this question about is it knowledge, I said, look, we're going to have to describe what we mean by knowledge and what model we have of it before we start saying is that being.
I'll tell you analogies.
But anyway,
nobody ever tells me that.
Yeah. Well, this thing about tarantulas and what their true nature is, it's like I don't think the Eleatics would posit like the transcendental nature of a tarantula and describe like what's an essential element of the tarantula, tastiness or lack of tastiness or whatever they call it. And so I don't think that would really be an Eleatic quest to describe.
Like, what would they say about that? What would the goddess say about that? If
about eating tarantulas?
You are experiencing the tarantula as disgusting,
well,
and someone else has it a different way. How are you both being with the taste of the tarantula in different ways of being?
All right. Well, the goddess she feeds off of ambrosia, right? The gods eat ambrosia, so it's not really a question that she has troubled herself with. But but I don't see any reason why that my tasting of the tarantula and your tasting of the tarantula, one has to be superior to the other. If in the fullness of being, our interactions with the tarantula are contained in there, there's room enough for me to like the tarantula and you to hate the tarantula and for the tarantula to be what it is. And taste there is just really a relationship between me and the tarantula and you and the tarantula. I don't really see any problem with having all these details and relationships bundled up together in being. And certainly the goddess doesn't eat tarantulas. But yeah, I don't see it as a problem. I just see it as more of a problem of modeling the particulars. But yeah, so that's basically where I fall on it.
Well, don't you see though how that if you extrapolate it out into not just like a cute example like the tarantula or is the honey sweet, that goes into everything. Like what is good, what is bad, what is justice? Justice can only be justice from Parmenides' perspective. Good can only be good, but different human beings, for a variety of reasons, will have different perspectives on what good is. So how can they be good in the same way at the same time under the same circumstances? I
don't see this as a valid objection to Parmenides so much as it might be a good objection to someone who holds some idea of transcendental nature of a tarantula or of justice that is then instantiated in some way that has to be universal across all instances of it. I don't. So when you say like what is if it's good for Parmenides but it's bad for holistic, how can we say whether it's good or bad? Who is to say that Parmenides has this transcendental nature of goodness that has to apply in a sense that conforms with both you and Parmenides pointing at something and saying good? He doesn't have that. So I don't.
So being has no qualities other than
it is all qualities. So Parmenides can just say like, let's just say we take the word good, and we say good is what is nutritious to a body or something, and so then we say apples are good for people, but they will. It's like what Heraclitus says, right? Like salt water is poison for people, but it's like life for fish. I butchered the phrase, but it's in there in Heraclitus. And so then you can say, well, for the person it's bad, and for the fish it's good. And it's like, all right, but when did we get to the part where the salt water had to be good in the terms of being healthy and nutritious for all things at all times? That was never part of it. Good was just this description or this way of referencing this helpful nutrition or this helpful life-givingness. And so when the human ate it, we wouldn't include that in the category of things that are good or drank it because humans don't drink salt water and walk away from it happy. And but it was in the category of good, this event of a fish swimming in water, because fish like salt water. Most of them do anyway. So it's just like a whole different system or way of looking at it. I wouldn't adopt the Platonic one. But I don't even want to bring Plato into it. I really have to go. Vrav, I will, and I'm sure Holistic, you had an excellent follow-up that would overthrow everything I just said. I really do have to go. Vrav, please feel free to jump in for like one last question or comment.
No, that's fine. I was just going to follow up to what Holistic was saying, but that'll kind of continue on the discussion, so I'll let you go. But thanks so much for great space.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all for being here. It was a great time, and I will continue this series. In the next episode, we'll get beyond the... It was my fault, really, and it was an excellent discussion with Ancient, so special thanks to Ancient. If you're not following him, please give him a follow. Actually, just everyone follow everyone, right? We're all good here. See you all later. Bye.